The royal decree arrived at dawn, sealed with blood, literally, and every wolf in the Moonstone kingdom knew what that meant. Alpha King Alexandros had invoked pact law. His 4-year-old daughter, Princess Callista, heir to the throne by forbidden bloodline, hadn't smiled in 6 months. Not since her mother, Queen Ismene, died under circumstances the council refused to discuss. The child wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. 16 nannies had failed. And now, under the ancient blood oath that bound the royal family to their people, Alexandros had 72 hours to restore his daughter's will to live, or forfeit the crown to his brother, Demetrios, a wolf who'd been circling the throne since the queen's funeral pyre turned to ash. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug, because what happens next will break you in ways you didn't know a story could. The new nanny arrived on the 71st hour. Her name was Talia. She came from the borderlands, from a village so small it didn't appear on kingdom maps, and she carried nothing but a leather satchel and a reputation for reviving dying foals. The castle steward, an ancient wolf named Nikias, met her at the obsidian gates with skepticism carved into every line of his weathered face. He'd watched 16 women, trained nursemaids, renowned healers, even a priestess blessed by the moon goddess herself, walk into Princess Callista's chambers with hope and walk out with their spirits shattered. She doesn't speak, Nikias warned as they climbed the spiral stairs toward the princess's tower. She doesn't cry. She sits by the window and stares at the mountains where her mother used to take her before. He stopped himself. Pact law forbade speaking of the queen's death. The official story was a hunting accident. Everyone knew it was a lie. You have 24 hours. If the child doesn't show improvement by tomorrow's sunset, the blood oath activates. Alpha Demetrios will challenge for the throne. And he'll win. Talia didn't respond. She simply adjusted the satchel on her shoulder and continued climbing. The princess's chambers occupied the highest room in the North Tower, a circular space filled with toys no child had touched in half a year. Wooden wolves lined the shelves. Silk banners depicting the kingdom's great hunts draped the walls. And in the center of it all, curled in a window seat overlooking the snow-capped Kairos mountains, sat the smallest, most heartbreaking figure Nikias had ever seen. Princess Kalista, 4 years old, daughter of the most powerful Alpha in 5 kingdoms, heir to a throne built on the bones of ancient wars, and completely, utterly silent. Her dark curls hung limp against her pale cheeks. Her gray eyes, her mother's eyes, stared unseeing at the horizon. She wore a white silk dress that had been changed 3 times that week because she refused to move, even to eat, and the servants had to coax broth down her throat while she remained motionless as a statue. Nikias had seen grief before. Every wolf experienced loss. But this was something different. This was a child whose soul had departed while her body remained. Talia entered the room alone. She'd asked Nikias to leave, and though it violated protocol, something in her steady green eyes made him obey. The door closed with a soft click. For a long moment Talia didn't speak. She simply stood there, studying the child, the room, the untouched breakfast tray on the table. Then she crossed to the window seat, not to the princess but to the window itself, and looked out at what Kalista saw every day. "The Kairos Mountains," Talia murmured. "Your mother rode there, didn't she? On the white mare from the royal stables. The one with the silver mane." The princess didn't react. Didn't even blink. Talia continued as if they were having a perfectly normal conversation. "I knew a white mare once. In my village. She was old, 20 years at least, and she'd outlived 3 owners. Everyone said she was magical. That she could sense storms 3 days before they arrived. That she'd never bucked, never bitten, never refused a rider. And one winter, the worst winter in 50 years, she saved a child who'd wandered into a blizzard. Found him by scent alone and stood over his body until the search party arrived at dawn. Still nothing from Kalista. But Talia noticed something. The smallest shift in the child's shoulders. A fraction of an inch, but movement nonetheless. "The mare died the following spring," Talia said softly. "And the child, a boy of 7, stopped speaking for months. His parents tried everything. Physicians, healers, even a wise woman from the eastern forests. Nothing worked. Until someone suggested that the boy needed something to honor the mare's memory. Something that would let him carry her with him. Now Callista's fingers twitched. Just barely. But Talia saw it. So the village came together and built a shrine. A small one. Just stones and wildflowers at the edge of the meadow where the mare used to graze. And every morning, the boy would go there and sit, and he'd tell the mare about his day. About the things he saw and the things he felt. And slowly, so slowly no one noticed at first, he started speaking again. Not to people. To the mare's memory. Until one day, he realized the words didn't hurt anymore. Talia turned from the window and crouched down to Callista's eye level, though the princess still wouldn't look at her. Your mother rode a white mare through these mountains, Talia whispered. And I think if you could ride one too, if you could go to the places she loved and feel the wind the way she felt it, maybe you'd find a way to carry her with you. Not to forget her. Never to forget her. But to let her live in your memories instead of your grief. For the first time in 6 months, Princess Callista's eyes moved. They didn't turn to Talia, but they shifted just slightly toward the mountains. And Talia knew she'd found the thread. The single strand of hope she needed to pull. Alpha King Alexandros stood in the throne room when Talia found him 3 hours later. He was alone, a rarity for a king whose every moment was typically surrounded by advisors, warriors, and sycophants, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His black hair, usually tied back in the traditional warrior's knot, fell loose around his shoulders. His golden eyes, the mark of the royal bloodline, were rimmed with exhaustion and something darker. Something that looked like surrender. She still hasn't spoken, he said without turning around. He'd scented Talia the moment she entered. Every alpha could identify pack members by scent, and Talia, as the new nanny, now carried the castle's signature blend of stone and pine. I've tried everything. I've begged the moon goddess. I've consulted every healer in 5 kingdoms. His voice cracked. I've failed her. The blood oath activates at sunset tomorrow. My brother will challenge. And I'll lose everything because I couldn't save my own daughter. Talia approached slowly, respectfully, but without the cowering fear most wolves showed in an alpha's presence. My lord, I have a suggestion. But it requires your participation. And your trust. Alexandros finally turned. He towered over her. Most alphas did. Their genetics engineered through generations for size and strength, but Talia held his gaze without flinching. What kind of suggestion? He asked, suspicion threading through his exhaustion. The princess needs to ride through the kingdom, Talia said. On a white horse. A unicorn if the old legends are true and one still exists. You need to take her to every place her mother loved. The mountain passes. The flower meadows. The waterfalls. And you need to do it publicly. Let the pack see her. Let them see you with her. Let them witness the bond between father and daughter, and let their energy, their love for their future queen, help bring her back. Alexandros stared at her like she'd suggested he fly to the moon. You want me to parade my traumatized daughter through the kingdom on a mythical creature? He said slowly. Do you have any idea what the council would say? What the pack would think? She can't even speak, woman. She'd fall off the horse within minutes. She won't, Talia said firmly. Not if you're holding her. Not if she feels safe. And not if she's returning to the places where she last felt her mother's presence. There are no unicorns, Alexandros snapped. They're legends. Stories for children. Then find the closest thing, Talia countered. A white horse. The most gentle mare in your stables. One that won't spook, won't bolt, won't do anything except carry a grieving child through the memories of her mother. Pause. You have 18 hours until the blood oath activates. What do you have to lose? The Alpha King's jaw clenched. For a moment, Talia thought he'd dismiss her like he'd dismissed countless others. But then something shifted in his golden eyes. Something desperate. If this fails, he said quietly, My daughter becomes collateral damage in my brother's power grab. He'll marry her off to some distant pact to secure alliances. She'll never know freedom. Never know love. She'll be a political tool until the day she dies. Then it won't fail, Talia said. The royal stables occupied the western edge of the castle grounds, a massive structure of white stone and carved timber that housed over 100 horses, war mounts, hunting steeds, carriage horses, and a handful of rare breeds kept for ceremonial purposes. The stable master, a grizzled wolf named Evander who'd served the royal family for 40 years, looked at Talia and Alexandros like they'd lost their minds when they explained what they needed. A white horse gentle enough for a traumatized child. Evander repeated. My lord, with respect, most of our whites are war-trained. They're bred for battle, not. I don't care what they're bred for, Alexandros interrupted. Do you have one or not? Evander hesitated. Then reluctantly. There's one. But she's old. 23 years. We kept her because Queen Ismene refused to let her be put down after she injured her leg 5 years ago. She hasn't been ridden since. He stopped, realizing what he was about to say. Since my wife died. Alexandros finished flatly. Show me. They found the mare in the farthest stall, away from the younger, more spirited horses. She was pure white, her coat shimmering like fresh snow even in the dim stable light, and despite her age, she held herself with quiet dignity. Her silver mane had been braided. Someone still cared for her, even if she wasn't ridden, and when she turned her head toward them, Talia saw intelligence in those dark eyes. Recognition. Her name is Nephili, Evander said softly. It means cloud in the old tongue. Queen Ismene named her when she was just a foal. They grew up together, in a way. The queen used to ride her through the mountains every dawn before court. Said Nephili helped her think clearly. Helped her make better decisions for the pack. Alexandros's expression cracked. Just for a moment. Grief and memory warring across his features. Then he locked it down behind the Alpha's mask. Can she still be ridden? He asked. She could, Evander said carefully. But my lord, she hasn't been handled by anyone except me and the stable hands in 6 months. She's grieving too in her way. Horses bond with their riders. When Queen Ismene died. He glanced at Talia, uncertain how much the new nanny knew. Nephili stopped eating for weeks. We thought we'd lose her. But you didn't, Talia said. No, Evander admitted. She survived. But she's not the same horse. None of us are the same, Alexandros murmured. He approached the stall slowly, carefully, and extended his hand. Nephili sniffed his palm, her ears flicking forward, and then, to everyone's surprise, she pressed her muzzle against his chest and exhaled. A long, shuddering breath that sounded almost like relief. The Alpha King's hand came up to stroke her neck. You miss her too, he whispered. Don't you, old girl? Nephili whickered softly. And in that moment, Talia knew they'd found their unicorn. They brought Princess Callista to the stables just after dawn, 17 hours before the blood oath would activate. The castle was already buzzing with tension. Word had spread that Alpha Demetrios had arrived the previous night, flanked by his personal guard. 12 of the most vicious wolves in the kingdom, each one loyal to him and him alone. He'd taken up residence in the East Wing, the traditional quarters for visiting dignitaries, and according to the servants' whispers, he'd been holding private meetings with members of the council all night. The challenge was coming. Everyone knew it. The only question was whether Alexandros would still be Alpha when it did. Nikias carried Kalista down to the stables wrapped in a white fur cloak, her small body limp and unresponsive as always. But when they entered the building, when the scent of hay and leather and horses filled the air, something changed. The princess's head lifted. Just slightly. Just enough to look around. Alexandros was already there, standing beside Nephili, who'd been brushed until her coat gleamed and fitted with the simplest saddle in the stable. No royal crests, no golden buckles, just plain leather designed for comfort over ceremony. Bring her here, Alexandros said quietly. Nikias approached, and as he did, Callista's gray eyes fixed on the white mare. For the first time in 6 months, her lips parted. Not to speak, but in recognition. In memory. She'd seen this horse before. With her mother. Alexandros took his daughter from Nikias's arms and held her close, feeling how light she'd become. How fragile. Then he turned her toward Nephili and spoke in a voice rough with emotion. "This is Nephili," he said. "Your mother's horse. She loved her very much. And I think Nephili would like to take us to the places your mother loved. Would you like that?" Callista didn't respond. But her eyes never left the mare. Talia stepped forward then, moving to Nephili's side. "She remembers you," she told the princess. "Horses never forget someone they love. And Nephili loved your mother. Which means she loves you too." Slowly, carefully, Alexandros lifted Callista onto Nephili's back. The mare stood perfectly still, as if she understood the precious cargo she carried. Then the Alpha King mounted behind his daughter, wrapping one arm securely around her small waist while taking the reins with his other hand. "Where do we go?" he asked Talia. "To the memories," Talia said simply. "Trust Nephili. She knows the way." And then they rode out of the stables into the breaking dawn, the white mare carrying an Alpha King and his broken princess toward something that might have been healing or might have been the final mistake that would cost them everything. The first place Nephili took them was the flower meadow at the base of the Kairos Mountains. It was an hour's ride from the castle, and by the time they arrived, the sun had climbed high enough to turn the frost on the grass into diamonds. Wildflowers, somehow still blooming despite the season, dotted the landscape in impossible colors. Purple and gold and crimson. Alexandros remembered this place. Ismene had brought him here during their courtship, back when he was just the heir and she was the daughter of a rival pack brought in to cement an alliance. She'd hated him at first. Hated the arranged marriage, hated the politics, hated everything about pack law that reduced her to a political tool. But in this meadow, surrounded by flowers that defied the approaching winter, she'd told him something he'd never forgotten. "If you want me to be your queen," she'd said, "then you need to understand that I'm not something you can own or control. I'm the wildflowers that grow where they're not supposed to. And if you try to cage me, I'll wither and die." He'd fallen in love with her in that moment. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she was fierce and honest and completely unafraid of him. Now, sitting on Nephili with his daughter in his arms, Alexandros felt that old grief resurface. The why of Ismene's death. The circumstances the council had buried under official lies and sealed records. She hadn't died in a hunting accident. She'd been murdered. By his own brother. The secret that would destroy the kingdom if it ever came to light. The reason the blood oath had been invoked. The reason Alexandros had spent 6 months protecting a truth that made him complicit in his own wife's death. Because pack law was absolute. Because blood challenges required proof. And because Alexandros had none except his own suspicions and the lingering scent of his brother's betrayal. "Mama loved the flowers," a tiny voice whispered. Alexandros froze. His arms tightened involuntarily around Kalista. She'd spoken. For the first time in 6 months, his daughter had spoken. "Yes," he managed, his voice breaking. "Yes, she did. She loved them very much." Callista's small hand reached out toward a cluster of golden blooms. "She said they were brave. Because they bloomed when everything else gave up." Tears burned Alexandros's eyes. He blinked them back, but they came anyway, hot and unstoppable. "Your mother was brave too," he whispered. "The bravest wolf I ever knew." "Is she in the flowers now?" Callista asked, her child's logic trying to make sense of death and absence. "Did she become brave like them?" "I think." Alexandros had to stop, had to breathe, had to force words through a throat tight with grief. "I think a part of her is in everything she loved. The flowers, the mountains, the wind, and you. Especially you." Callista leaned back against her father's chest, her small body finally relaxing. "Can we stay here?" "For as long as you want," Alexandros promised. They stayed until noon. By the time they returned to the castle, Word had spread throughout the entire kingdom. The Alpha King had been seen riding through the meadows with his daughter on a white horse. Servants had witnessed them. Farmers, merchants traveling the mountain roads. And by some miracle, or perhaps by Talia's careful planning, artists had been present to capture the moment. Sketches were already circulating through the pack. Images of Alexandros holding Callista, the white mare beneath them, the flower meadow in the background. It was exactly the kind of public display the blood oath required. Proof that the heir to the throne was recovering. That the bond between father and daughter remained strong. That the pact's future was secure. But Alpha Demetrios saw it differently. He was waiting in the throne room when Alexandros dismounted, helped Kalista down from Nephili, and handed his daughter to Talia's care. The princess was tired, more animated than she'd been in months, but exhausted from the emotional toll of remembering, and Talia took her back to the tower with promises of warm milk and rest. Alexandros entered the throne room alone. His brother stood at the base of the raised platform where the Moonstone throne sat, a massive chair carved from a single piece of black obsidian and inlaid with moonstones that glowed faintly even in daylight. Demetrios was shorter than Alexandros by 3 inches, but he carried himself with the coiled menace of a snake about to strike. His eyes were amber rather than gold, a recessive trait that marked him as secondary bloodline, and his hair was shot through with premature gray. He was 42, 6 years older than Alexandros, and he'd spent his entire life waiting for the throne he believed should have been his. "Brother," Demetrios said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I hear you've been taking morning rides with your daughter. How touching. The pack is absolutely buzzing about it." Alexandros didn't respond immediately. He walked past Demetrios, climbed the 3 steps to the throne, and sat down with the casual authority of someone who'd been born to rule. "The blood oath required proof that my daughter is recovering," Alexandros said evenly. "I've provided that proof. The challenge is unnecessary." "Is it?" Demetrios tilted his head. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been parading a traumatized child around the kingdom in a desperate attempt to hold on to power." She spoke 3 sentences. "That's not recovery. That's theater." "She spoke," Alexandros said, his voice dropping to alpha command. "Which is more than she's done in 6 months. The blood oath is satisfied." "The council will decide that," Demetrios countered. "I've already called for an emergency session tonight, and I think you'll find that several members have concerns about your fitness to rule. Concerns about whether a king who couldn't protect his wife can be trusted to protect the pack." The temperature in the room plummeted. Alexandros rose from the throne slowly, every movement deliberate and dangerous. "Be very careful what you're implying," he said softly. "I'm not implying anything," Demetrios replied. "I'm stating facts. Queen Ismene died under mysterious circumstances. The official story is a hunting accident, but everyone knows that's a lie. And you, grieving devastated you, have been so focused on keeping secrets that you've neglected the most basic duty of an alpha, protecting your heir. My daughter is protected." "Is she?" Demetrios smiled again. "Because it seems to me that if someone wanted to harm her, if someone saw her as an obstacle to the throne, they'd have plenty of opportunities. Especially now that you're taking her on these little public excursions. All it would take is one frightened horse, one loose saddle, one unfortunate accident. And the only thing standing between me and the crown would be you." Alexandros moved so fast Demetrios didn't see it coming. One moment the Alpha King was standing by the throne. The next, he had his brother pinned against the nearest wall, one hand wrapped around his throat, claws extended. "If you touch my daughter," Alexandros growled, his voice inhuman with rage, "if you even think about harming her, I will tear you apart in front of the entire pack. Council law be damned. Blood oath be damned. I will end you." Demetrios gasped for air, but his eyes gleamed with triumph. Because now he had witnesses. 4 council members had entered the throne room just in time to see the Alpha King assault his own brother. just in time to see Alexandros lose control. "Let me go," Demetrios choked out. "Unless you want to prove my point about your instability." Alexandros's claws retracted. He released Demetrios and stepped back, chest heaving, every instinct screaming at him to finish what he'd started. But he couldn't, because pact law was absolute, and attacking a challenger before the council voted was grounds for immediate removal. Demetrios adjusted his collar, his smile widening. "Tonight," he said, "the council meets at sunset. And when they vote, brother, you'll finally understand what it feels like to lose everything." The emergency council session was held in the Great Hall, a cavernous space beneath the castle that had hosted pact gatherings for 5 centuries. Torches lined the walls, casting dancing shadows across the ancient stone. The council, 15 wolves drawn from the most powerful families in the kingdom, sat in a semicircle at the far end of the hall. And in the center, facing them, stood Alexandros and Demetrios. Callista was not present. Talia had stayed with her in the tower, keeping the princess safe and distracted while the fate of her father, and her future, was decided by wolves who cared more about power than people. The council's head, a white-haired elder named Philippos, called the session to order. "We are here," he began, his voice carrying easily through the hall, "to address a challenge brought forth by Alpha Demetrios regarding the blood oath invoked by Alpha King Alexandros. The oath stipulated that Princess Callista, heir to the throne by forbidden bloodline, must show signs of recovery within 72 hours, or the king would forfeit his right to rule. The question before us: has this condition been satisfied?" Murmurs rippled through the gathered pact members who'd been allowed to witness. Technically, blood oaths were private council matters. But Demetrios had insisted on transparency, on letting the pact see exactly what kind of king Alexandros had become. "The princess spoke today," Alexandros said before Demetrios could launch into whatever prepared speech he'd crafted. "For the first time in 6 months, she engaged with her surroundings. She asked about her mother. She's healing. The oath is satisfied." 3 sentences, Demetrios interjected smoothly. She spoke 3 sentences during a carefully orchestrated public display. That's not recovery. That's a performance designed to manipulate this council. "It's more than she's done in half a year," Alexandros countered. "And it's progress. Real progress. The kind that takes time and patience. Things you'd understand if you'd ever cared about anything beyond your own ambition." Philippos raised a hand for silence. "Alpha Demetrios, you claim the blood oath has not been satisfied. Present your evidence." Demetrios stepped forward, and for the first time, Alexandros saw the trap he'd walked into. His brother had been planning this for months, maybe years, and every move, every decision Alexandros had made since Ismene's death, had been leading to this moment. "My evidence," Demetrios said, "is not just the princess's continued silence. It's the pattern of instability and poor judgment that has defined my brother's rule since Queen Ismene's death. He has isolated himself from the council. He has refused to name a successor should anything happen to him and the princess. He has allowed secrets to fester within the royal family, secrets that threaten the stability of the pact." "What secrets?" Alexandros demanded, but he already knew. His heart was already sinking. Demetrios turned to face him fully, and in his eyes, Alexandros saw murder disguised as justice. "The secret," his brother said clearly, "that Queen Ismene's death was not an accident, that she was killed, murdered by someone within the pact, and that you, dear brother, have spent 6 months covering it up." The hall erupted. Shouts and gasps and accusations flying from every direction. Philippos banged his staff against the stone floor, demanding order, but the chaos had already spread. Alexandros stood frozen, his worst fear realized. Because Demetrios wasn't wrong. He had covered it up. He'd had the investigation sealed, the witnesses silenced, the evidence buried. Not to protect himself. To protect his daughter. Because if the pact learned that Ismene had been murdered, If they learned why and by whom, it would tear the kingdom apart. Order! Philippos roared. Order in this hall. Slowly the noise subsided. But the damage was done. Every wolf in the room was now looking at Alexandros with suspicion and betrayal. Alpha King, Philippos said, his voice heavy with disappointment. Is this accusation true? Did you conceal evidence regarding the queen's death? Alexandros could have lied. Should have lied. But he was tired. So tired of carrying the weight of secrets that weren't his to bear. Yes, he said. Another eruption. More shouts. More accusations. I sealed the investigation, Alexandros continued, raising his voice to be heard, because the truth would have destroyed everything Queen Ismene worked to build. She died protecting this pact. And I will not let her sacrifice be in vain because of political vultures who murdered her? Demetrios interrupted. Because that's what you're not saying, isn't it? You know who killed her. You've always known. And you've been protecting them. I've been protecting my daughter, Alexandros shouted. I've been protecting her from the truth that her mother died because of a power struggle she never asked to be part of. Then tell us, Demetrios said quietly. Tell the council who killed Queen Ismene. Give us the name. Or admit that you're too weak to lead this pack. The hall fell silent. Every eye fixed on Alexandros. And in that moment he had to choose. Protect his daughter by keeping the secret that would make him look guilty. Or expose the truth and risk everything. He looked at Philippos. At the council members. At the gathered pack. And then he said the words that would change everything. She was killed, Alexandros said slowly. By my brother. By Demetrios. Because she refused to support his challenge for the throne. Because she stood in his way. The silence that followed was absolute. Demetrios laughed. It started as a chuckle and built to full-throated amusement that echoed through the great hall like madness. He's lost his mind, Demetrios said to the council. Can't you see? He's so desperate to hold on to power that he's willing to accuse his own brother of murder. Without proof. Without evidence. With nothing but paranoid delusions and... I have proof, Alexandros said. The laughter stopped. I have her journal, Alexandros continued. Queen Ismene kept detailed records of every threat made against her. Every conversation. Every moment she felt unsafe. And in the weeks before her death, she wrote extensively about you, Demetrios. About your late-night visits. Your thinly veiled suggestions that she should reconsider her support for my rule. Your warnings about what might happen to our daughter if Ismene continued to oppose you. Demetrios's face had gone pale. A journal proves nothing. It's hearsay. It's written in her own hand, Alexandros said. With dates and details that corroborate witness statements I've kept sealed. Statements from servants who saw you near the royal stables the morning she died. From guards who heard you arguing with her the night before. From the stable master who found evidence that someone had tampered with her saddle. Evidence that matched tools from your personal workshop. That's circumstantial at best, Demetrios sputtered. You can't. And I have the murder weapon, Alexandros finished. The blade you used to cut through the saddle's crucial strap. The one you thought you'd hidden in the armory but that my head of security recovered 3 months ago. The one with your scent all over it. The council erupted again, but this time the anger was directed at Demetrios. Philippos was already signaling for guards. Pack members were shouting for justice, for retribution, for blood. Demetrios backed away, his eyes wild. You can't prove any of this. You're lying. You've fabricated evidence because you're too weak to. Guards, Philippos commanded. Detain Alpha Demetrios pending formal investigation. But Demetrios was faster. He shifted, a violation of hall law, and in his wolf form, he lunged not for Alexandros but for the doors. For escape. His personal guards stationed outside would help him flee. Help him disappear into the borderlands where pack law couldn't reach. He almost made it. Alexandros shifted mid-leap, his larger alpha form tackling Demetrios before he could reach the exit. They crashed together in a tangle of fur and fangs, and the hall erupted into chaos as other wolves shifted, unsure who to support, unsure what was happening. The fight lasted less than a minute. Alexandros had size, strength, and the righteous fury of a father protecting his daughter. He pinned Demetrios to the ground, jaws locked around his brother's throat, and growled one word. Yield. Demetrios, blood streaming from a dozen wounds, finally went limp in submission. Alexandros released him, shifted back to human form, and stood over his brother's broken body. You killed my wife, he said, his voice raw. You traumatized my daughter. And you tried to take my throne. The penalty is death. And I should execute you right here, right now, in front of everyone. Then do it, Demetrios gasped. Because if you don't, I'll never stop. I'll never stop coming for your crown, for your daughter, for everything you love. Alexandros looked at the council, at Philippos, at the pack members who'd witnessed everything. No, he said finally. I won't kill you. 'Cause that's what you want. Quick death. An honorable end. Instead you'll stand trial, face judgment, and live with the knowledge that you failed. That the throne you wanted so badly will never be yours. That history will remember you as the wolf who murdered his queen and lost everything because of it. He turned to Philippos. Take him to the cells. Post guards. No visitors. And begin preparations for a formal blood trial. It will be done, Philippos said. As Demetrios was dragged away, human form now, naked and bloody and defeated, Alexandros felt something crack inside his chest. The secret he'd carried for 6 months was finally free. The truth was out. Ismene could rest knowing her murderer would face justice. But there was no triumph in it. No satisfaction. Only exhaustion and grief and the hollow victory of surviving when the person he loved most was gone forever. Alexandros found Talia in the tower an hour later. She was sitting beside Callista's bed, reading from a book of old kingdom legends while the princess listened with half-closed eyes. When he entered, Talia looked up, and whatever she saw in his face made her carefully close the book and stand. The council session? She asked quietly. It's over, Alexandros said. He crossed to his daughter's bedside and knelt down so he was eye level with her. Kalista, there's something I need to tell you. The little girl's gray eyes, so like her mother's, focused on him with an awareness that seemed far too old for 4 years. The man who hurt your mama, Alexandros said, his voice breaking despite his best efforts to stay strong. He won't hurt anyone ever again. He's been caught. And he'll face justice for what he did. Callista sat up slowly. Uncle Demetrios. The fact that she knew, that on some level this child had always known, nearly destroyed him. Yes, Alexandros whispered. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect her. I'm so sorry you had to lose her because of. Small arms wrapped around his neck. Callista held him with surprising strength, and for the first time since Ismene's death, she cried. Not silent tears. Real sobs that shook her whole body. Grief finally released after 6 months of being locked inside. Alexandros held his daughter and cried with her. For Ismene. For the innocence Callista had lost. For the months they'd both spent trapped in separate prisons of silence and secrets. Talia quietly left the room, giving them privacy. And outside the tower window, the sun set on the longest day of Alexandros's life. The next morning something miraculous happened. Princess Callista woke up early, without prompting, and asked if they could go riding again. On Nephili, she clarified, as if there could be any doubt. I want to see more places. The places Mama loved. Alexandros, who'd barely slept, found himself smiling for the first time in what felt like years. Of course. Wherever you want to go. They spent the next week riding through the kingdom. To the mountain waterfalls where Ismene used to swim in summer. To the forest glades where she'd hunted with her personal guard. To the village markets where she'd insisted on walking among common wolves, buying bread and cheese and listening to their concerns like she was one of them instead of their queen. And everywhere they went, Callista spoke a little more. Questions, shared memories, slowly pieced together an understanding of who her mother had been beyond the idealized image of a lost parent. Talia accompanied them on these rides, always keeping a respectful distance but close enough to help if needed. And Alexandros began to notice things about the nanny that he'd been too distracted to see before. The way she moved with unconscious grace, like someone trained in combat despite her humble background. The way her green eyes tracked threats before they materialized. The way she positioned herself between Kalista and any potential danger. Her body language that of a trained warrior, not a village girl who worked with horses. On the 8th day, after they'd returned from a particularly long ride to the eastern borders, Alexandros finally asked the question that had been building in his mind. "Who are you really?" he said as they stood in the stables, watching Evander remove Nephili's tack. "And don't tell me you're just a nanny from the borderlands. I've seen the way you move, the way you assess situations. You're trained, military trained. So who sent you?" Talia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Your wife did." Alexandros froze. "That's impossible. Ismene has been dead for 6 months. "I know." Talia turned to face him fully. "Queen Ismene contacted me 8 months ago. 2 months before she died. She knew someone was trying to kill her. She didn't know who yet, but she felt it. And she was worried about what would happen to Callista if she died. So she hired me. Not as a nanny. As a guardian. Someone to protect your daughter if the worst happened." "A guardian," Alexandros repeated slowly. "From where?" "The Shadowpaw clan," Talia said. "We're mercenaries. Assassins, some would say, though we prefer the term protectors for hire. Your wife paid me a fortune to integrate myself into palace life, to wait for the right moment, and to ensure that no matter what happened, Princess Callista would survive." Alexandros's hand went to the dagger at his belt. Instinct, not genuine threat. "You've been here the entire time. During the past 6 months." "Not in the castle," Talia clarified. "I was nearby, watching, waiting. When I heard about the blood oath, I knew it was time. So I presented myself as a nanny and offered the white horse solution because it was the only way I could think of to reach Callista without raising suspicion." He paused. "Your wife's last instructions to me were clear. Keep her daughter alive, help her heal, and make sure she never forgets how much she was loved." Alexandros stared at this woman, this stranger who'd been sent by his dead wife, and felt something shift in his chest. Not attraction exactly. It was too soon for that, and his grief was too fresh. But recognition, respect, gratitude for someone who'd honored Ismene's final wishes when he'd been too broken to do it himself. "Why tell me now?" he asked. "Because Demetrios had accomplices," Talia said bluntly. "The council arrested him, but there are others. Wolves who supported his challenge. Who believed he should be king. And some of them won't accept that he lost. Which means Callista is still in danger. Which means I can't protect her effectively if you don't know what I am and what I'm capable of." "What are you capable of?" Alexandros asked. Talia's smile was sharp as a blade. "Everything necessary to keep your daughter alive." The blood trial lasted 3 days. It was a spectacle, the kind of public judgment that happened maybe once a generation in the Moonstone kingdom. Demetrios stood accused of regicide, conspiracy, and treason. The evidence Alexandros presented, Ismene's journal, witness statements, the tampered saddle strap, was damning beyond doubt. But Demetrios's defense counsel, a clever wolf named Heracles who specialized in counsel law, argued that the evidence was circumstantial. That journals could be forged. That witnesses could be coerced. That a grieving king looking for someone to blame might have constructed an elaborate conspiracy to explain what was simply a tragic accident. It almost worked. Not because the council believed him, but because pact law required absolute proof for a death sentence. And absolute proof in cases of murder was notoriously difficult to provide when the victim couldn't testify. Then, on the 3rd day, something unexpected happened. Princess Callista asked to address the council. She was 4 years old. According to pact law, she couldn't testify, couldn't give evidence, couldn't participate in official proceedings until she reached her coming-of-age ceremony at 15. But she was also the heir to the throne. And under the ancient laws that predated even the kingdom itself, an heir, regardless of age, could petition the council for the right to speak on matters that directly affected the royal bloodline. Philippos had no choice but to grant the request. They brought Kalista into the great hall at sunset on the third day. She wore a white dress, the color of mourning in wolf culture, and she walked without assistance, her small hand clasped in her father's. Talia followed 3 steps behind, her eyes scanning the crowd for threats. The hall fell silent as Kalista climbed the steps to the council's platform. Someone had placed a small stool there so she could be seen over the railing. She stood on it, looked out at the assembled wolves, and spoke in a clear, steady voice that carried through the space. "My mama told me something before she died," Kalista began. "She said that if anything bad ever happened to her, I should remember 3 things. First, she loved me more than anything in the world. Second, she loved our pack and wanted to protect it. And third, if Uncle Demetrios ever said he was trying to help me, I should run away as fast as I could and find Papa." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Demetrios, seated in the prisoner's cage at the far end of the hall, had gone very pale. "I didn't understand what she meant," Kalista continued. "I was little. I thought maybe she was just worried because Uncle Demetrios was always saying mean things about Papa. But then she died. And Uncle Demetrios came to see me. And he told me that Papa was sad and couldn't take care of me anymore. And that maybe I should come live with him instead. And I remembered what Mama said. So I stopped talking. Because I thought if I stopped talking, no one could make me go with him. No one could make me leave Papa." The silence in the hall was absolute. "Mama knew," Kalista said, tears streaming down her small face. "She knew Uncle Demetrios wanted to hurt her. He told me. She warned me. And I'm telling you now because Papa says you need proof. So here's my proof. My mama knew she was going to die. And she knew who was going to kill her. And she told me to stay away from him. And now I'm saying it in front of everyone so you all know too." Philippos looked at Demetrios. At the council members. At the packed hall. "Does the accused wish to respond to these accusations?" he asked. Demetrios stood slowly. His face was a mask of rage barely contained. "The child is traumatized," he said. "She's been manipulated by her father. This entire trial is a farce designed to—" "I'm not traumatized," Kalista interrupted, her voice sharp with a 4-year-old's absolute certainty. "I'm telling the truth. And you're lying. Just like you lied when you said Mama's death was an accident. Just like you lied when you said you wanted to help me. You're a liar. And liars don't get to be king." The hall erupted. Not in chaos this time but in unified outrage. Because whatever doubts might have existed about Alexandros's evidence, no one could deny the testimony of a child who had no reason to lie. No political motivation. No understanding of power games or throne struggles. Just simple, devastating truth. Philippos banged his staff for order. When the noise subsided, he spoke with the weight of 5 centuries of pact law behind him. "The council has heard enough," he declared. "Alpha Demetrios, you are found guilty of regicide, conspiracy to commit murder, and treason against the royal bloodline. The sentence is death, to be carried out at dawn tomorrow by the traditional method, trial by combat, with Alpha King Alexandros as the crown's champion." Demetrios's face twisted with fury. "You'll regret this," he snarled at Alexandros. "All of you will regret." "Take him away," Philippos ordered. Guards dragged Demetrios from the hall while he screamed threats and promises of vengeance. But they were empty words now. The words of a wolf who'd lost everything and knew it. Alexandros lifted Callista from the stool and held her close. "You were so brave," he whispered. "Your mother would be so proud of you." "I did it for her," Callista said simply. "And for you. 'Cause we're a family. And families protect each other. Alexandros carried his daughter from the Great Hall while the pack erupted in cheers and celebration. Justice had been served. The murderer would die. And the kingdom could finally begin to heal. But as they walked through the castle corridors, Talia appeared beside them with an expression that made Alexandros's blood run cold. "We have a problem," she said quietly. "Demetrios's personal guard. All 12 of them. They're missing. They were supposed to be detained with the other conspirators, but they vanished sometime during the trial. And according to my sources, they're planning something. Something tonight. Before the execution can happen." Alexandros's grip on Kalista tightened. "What kind of something?" "A rescue attempt," Talia said. "Or worse, if they can't free him, they'll complete his mission. They'll come for Callista. Because even if Demetrios dies tomorrow, if the heir dies too, his supporters can claim the throne as forfeit. They can install whoever they want as regent. And the kingdom falls into civil war. How long do we have?" Alexandros asked. "Hours," Talia said. "Maybe less. I've already alerted the royal guard. But we can't trust everyone in the castle. Some of them were loyal to Demetrios. Some might still be. The safest place is the stables," Alexandros said immediately. "It's defensible. Single entrance. And we have Nephili. The horse." Talia looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "The horse," Alexandros confirmed. "Because if we need to run, if we need to escape, Nephili knows every hidden trail in these mountains. She can get us to safety faster than any war mount." It wasn't a perfect plan. But it was the only one they had. They made it to the stables just as the sun disappeared behind the Kairos mountains. Evander met them at the entrance, already armed and clearly expecting trouble. "Someone's been asking questions about the princess's riding schedule," the old stablemaster said. "Guards I don't recognize. Claiming they're assigned to her protection detail. But I've been here 40 years. I know every royal guard by name. These wolves are strangers." "Demetrios's men," Alexandros confirmed. He handed Kalista to Talia. "Get her to Nephili's stall. Saddle the mare for distance, not ceremony. Pack water and food. If shooting starts, you ride out the back trail, the one the queen used for her dawn hunts. It leads to the northern border. 3 days hard riding, and you'll reach the Shadowpaw clan's territory. They'll protect her." "What about you?" Talia demanded. "I'll hold them off as long as I can," Alexandros said. "Buy you time to escape." "That's suicide," Talia said flatly. "That's my duty," Alexandros countered. "I'm her father, her king. And I will not let her die because I failed to protect her mother." For a moment, Talia looked like she wanted to argue. Then she nodded once, sharp and military, and disappeared into the stables with Kalista. Alexandros turned to Evander. "How many wolves can you spare?" 10, the stable master said. "Good fighters. Loyal. They'll stand with you. Get them armed and positioned at the entrance," Alexandros ordered. "No one gets through unless I give the word." Evander moved to comply, and Alexandros took up position in the center of the stable yard. He shifted partially, a battle form that was half wolf, half human, maximizing strength while maintaining the ability to use weapons. His claws extended, his senses sharpened, and he waited. They came an hour after dark. Not 12 wolves, 24. Demetrios had twice as many conspirators as intelligence suggested. They emerged from the shadows surrounding the stable complex, moving with military precision, armed with silver-edged blades that gleamed in the torchlight. Their leader, a massive gray wolf named Argos, stopped 20 paces from Alexandros and shifted to human form. "Stand aside, Alexandros," Argos said. "This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. Give us the child and we'll let you live." "The child is the heir to the throne," Alexandros replied. "And you're asking me to hand her over to the wolves who murdered her mother?" "No. I don't think I will," Argos sighed. "I was hoping you'd be reasonable. But I suppose that's why Demetrios always said you were unfit to lead. Too sentimental. Too attached. A good king knows when to sacrifice pawns to protect the kingdom. My daughter is not a pawn, Alexandros growled. And this kingdom doesn't need protecting from me. It needs protecting from traitors like you. Then you'll die protecting her, Argos said. He shifted back to wolf form and the attack began. 24 against 11. The math was brutal. But Alexandros and his defenders had terrain advantage. The narrow entrance forced the attackers to come at them in manageable numbers. And they had motivation. These weren't mercenaries fighting for coin. These were wolves defending their future queen. The battle lasted 17 minutes. Felt like hours. Alexandros fought like a creature possessed. His alpha strength enhanced by desperation and grief and fury. He tore through 3 wolves in the first minute. 5 more in the second. But they kept coming. Wave after wave. And his defenders were falling. Evander took a silver blade to the shoulder and went down. 2 younger wolves were overwhelmed and dragged away from the entrance. And then, impossibly, the tide began to turn. Because reinforcements arrived. Not royal guards. Not palace security. But common wolves. Pack members who'd heard about the attack through the servant network. Farmers. Merchants. Craftsmen. Wolves who remembered Queen Ismene's kindness and who loved Princess Callista and who would not stand by while traitors murdered their future. They poured into the stable yard with pitchforks and hammers and kitchen knives. They had no training. No coordination. But they had numbers. And they had heart. The conspirators broke. Argos tried to rally them. Tried to push through to the stables where Kalista was hidden. But he was too late. The common wolves had formed a living wall between the attackers and their target. And when Argos tried to force his way through, 3 farmers tackled him simultaneously. And the big gray wolf went down under a pile of bodies. Within minutes it was over. The conspirators who survived surrendered. The rest lay dead or dying in the stable yard. Alexandros, covered in blood and barely standing, made his way into the stables. He found Talia in Nephili's stall, standing protectively over Callista with a blade in each hand. The princess sat on the white mare's back, eyes wide but unharmed. "It's over," Alexandros managed. "They're dead or captured." Talia didn't lower her weapons immediately. She studied him, searching for deception or compulsion. Then she saw the common wolves behind him, the farmers and merchants who'd risked everything, and she finally relaxed. "Your people love you," she said quietly. "Both of you. Do you understand how rare that is? How precious?" Alexandros looked at the wolves crowding the stable entrance. At their battered faces and makeshift weapons. At the devotion shining in their eyes. "I'm beginning to," he said. Dawn came cold and clear. Perfect weather for an execution. The entire pack gathered in the great courtyard. Thousands of wolves pressed together to witness justice. Demetrios was led out in chains, still defiant, still sneering, still convinced somehow that he'd win. That he'd escape. That destiny had chosen him for the throne. He was wrong. The trial by combat lasted less than a minute. Alexandros gave his brother one chance to yield, to accept exile instead of death. Demetrios responded by attacking with everything he had left, all his rage and ambition and thwarted dreams channeled into one final, desperate lunge. Alexandros caught him mid-leap, slammed him into the stone courtyard, and drove his claws through his brother's heart. It was brutal, quick, and absolutely final. The pack erupted in cheers. Justice for Queen Ismene. Safety for Princess Callista. An end to the conspiracy that had nearly torn the kingdom apart. But Alexandros felt no victory. Only the hollow satisfaction of a necessary evil completed. He'd killed his own brother. Executed family to protect family. And that weight would stay with him forever. He carried Demetrios's body to the funeral pyre himself. Because despite everything, despite the murder and betrayal and cruelty, Demetrios had once been his brother. Had once been the child who taught him to hunt. who shared his lessons, who laughed at the same jokes. That wolf was gone, had been gone for years. But Alexandros honored the memory anyway. Afterward, covered in ash and exhausted beyond measure, Alexandros returned to the castle. He found Callista and Talia in the flower meadow, the place where this whole journey had begun. His daughter was making chains from golden blooms while Nephili grazed nearby, and Talia sat on a stone reading from that same book of legends. "Papa!" Kalista called when she saw him. She ran to him without hesitation, without fear, and threw herself into his arms. "We're making flower crowns for Mama. Do you want one?" Alexandros held his daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. "I would love one," he said. They spent the afternoon in the meadow. Just the three of them, father, daughter, and the guardian sent by a dead queen to protect the living. And for the first time since Ismene's death, Alexandros felt something like peace settling over him. It wouldn't last. There would be more challenges, more threats, more moments when he'd have to choose between love and duty, between mercy and justice, between the kingdom's needs and his daughter's welfare. But for now, in this moment, they were safe. They were together. And they were healing. 3 months later, on the first anniversary of Queen Ismene's death, Princess Callista asked if they could take Nephili on one final ride. "Where do you want to go?" Alexandros asked. "Everywhere," Callista said. "All the places Mama loved. I want to ride through the whole kingdom and remember her everywhere. Not just in one place. Not just in my room or in my head. I want her to be part of everything." So they rode. For 30 days, they traveled through the Moonstone kingdom on the back of a white mare. Father and daughter with Talia always nearby, visiting every village and hamlet and hidden valley. They stopped in marketplaces and let Kalista speak with common wolves. They climbed to mountain shrines and left offerings for the moon goddess. They swam in cold rivers and picked wildflowers and sat beside campfires listening to storytellers share legends of the old days. And everywhere they went, the pack saw their future queen. Not as a broken child locked in a tower, but as a living, laughing, vibrant presence who carried her mother's spirit without being crushed by her mother's memory. Artists captured their journey in paintings and songs. Stories spread about the Alpha King who'd chosen love over pride, who'd exposed his own brother's treachery to protect his daughter, who'd fought beside common wolves instead of hiding behind palace walls. And stories spread about Princess Callista, the little girl who'd found her voice again on the back of a white horse, who'd testified against a murderer, who'd reminded everyone that courage came in small packages and that the strongest wolves were often the smallest. But the most important story, the one that mattered to Alexandros and Callista and Talia, was simpler. It was the story of a father who'd almost lost his daughter to grief and found her again through patience and love. The story of a child who'd learned that remembering someone didn't have to hurt, that holding on to memories could be a source of strength instead of sorrow. And the story of a white mare named Nephili who'd carried them both through darkness into light. On the 30th night, they returned to the castle, exhausted, sunburned, covered in road dust, and happier than they'd been in over a year. Callista fell asleep in her father's arms before they even reached her chambers. Alexandros carried her to bed, tucked her under quilts embroidered with wolves and mountains, and kissed her forehead. "Sleep well, little one," he whispered. "Your mother would be so proud of you." "She's proud of you too," Callista mumbled, half asleep. "She told me, in my dreams. She said you were the bravest wolf she ever knew. And that she chose right when she chose you." Alexandros's breath caught. She did. But Callista was already asleep, a small smile on her face, the smile that had been missing for so long and was now a permanent fixture. Talia waited in the corridor outside. Over the past months, she'd become more than a guardian. She'd become part of their small, strange family. The piece that completed the circle. "Will you stay?" Alexandros asked. "The contract your wife made with my wife is fulfilled. Callista is safe, happy, healing. You're free to return to your clan." Talia leaned against the stone wall, considering. I could leave, she admitted. But I don't think I will. Because I made a promise to your wife. To keep Callista safe and help her heal and make sure she never forgets how much she was loved. And I don't think that promise has an expiration date. So you'll stay. As her guardian. As her guardian, Talia confirmed. Then with a small smile. And maybe as something more. If you'd like. Because I've come to care about you both. Not as a job. Not as a contract. But as family, Alexandros finished. Family, Talia agreed. They stood together in the quiet corridor, listening to Callista's soft breathing, and for the first time in over a year, Alexandros allowed himself to imagine a future. Not one that replaced Ismene. She would always be the love of his life, the queen of his heart, but one that honored her memory by moving forward, by living, by finding joy in the spaces between grief. There's something I need to tell you, Alexandros said quietly. About Ismene. About why she hired you. It wasn't just to protect Callista from Demetrios. Talia's eyes sharpened. What do you mean? My wife had visions, Alexandros said. Not consistently. Not reliably. But sometimes when the moon was full, she'd dream things that came true. And in the weeks before she died, she had a vision. She saw Callista. Older. Maybe 15 or 16. Standing on the Moonstone throne. But she wasn't alone. There were two women beside her. One dark-haired and fierce. The other with green eyes and scars on her hands from working with horses. Talia's hand instinctively went to her own scarred palms, marks from years of training foals and breaking wild horses. Ismene told me, Alexandros continued, that the dark-haired woman was her. Or her memory. Or her legacy. She wasn't sure. But the woman with green eyes, the one with the scars, she was real. And she was family. And Ismene said that if I ever met a woman matching that description, I should trust her completely. Because she was sent by the moon goddess herself to complete what Ismene couldn't finish. Silence stretched between them. Talia's voice was barely a whisper when she finally spoke. She saw me. Before we ever met. She saw someone like you, Alexandros said. And when you walked into that tower 3 months ago, when you suggested the white horse, when you looked at my daughter with kindness instead of pity, I knew. I knew you were the woman from Ismene's vision. The one sent to save us when we couldn't save ourselves. I'm not. Talia stopped, struggling with words. I'm not some mystical savior. I'm just a mercenary who made a deal with a queen. You're the woman who brought my daughter back from the edge of silence, Alexandros said. You're the woman who stood between her and death when I was too busy fighting political battles to see the real threat. You're the woman who honored a dead queen's wishes when you had every reason to walk away. So maybe you're not mystical. But you're definitely a savior. At least to us. Talia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Your wife must have been extraordinary. She was, Alexandros agreed. And I think she'd be happy knowing that the person she sent to protect our daughter ended up becoming family. Ended up becoming someone we could both trust and love. Love, Talia repeated carefully. Alexandros met her gaze steadily. Not romantic love. Not yet. It's too soon and my grief is too fresh. But the kind of love that family shares. The kind that's built on respect and trust and shared purpose. The kind that grows slowly, naturally, like wildflowers that bloom where they're not supposed to. Talia smiled at that, at the echo of Ismene's words about wildflowers that refuse to be caged. I can work with that, she said. Slow, natural, built on trust. Good, Alexandros said. Because Kalista needs stability. She needs people she can count on. And I need. He paused, vulnerable in a way alphas rarely allowed themselves to be. I need to know that if something happens to me, she'll be protected, loved, raised by someone who understands what it means to be both strong and gentle. Nothing's going to happen to you, Talia said firmly. Not on my watch. We can't know that, Alexandros countered. The kingdom is stable now, but there will always be threats. Always be wolves who see the throne as something to be taken rather than earned. And I need to know that when those threats come, you'll be there. For her. For Callista. I will, Talia promised. I swear it on my blade, my blood, and the moon goddess herself. I will protect her until my last breath. Alexandros extended his hand, not as a king to a subject, but as one warrior to another. As one parent to another parent, even if Talia wasn't Callista's birth mother. As one grieving soul to another who understood loss. Talia took his hand, and they stood there in the quiet corridor, sealing a pact that went deeper than words. A pact of family and protection and shared responsibility for a little girl who'd survived more pain than anyone her age should ever have to bear. 6 months passed. Then a year. Then 2. Princess Callista grew from a silent, haunted 4-year-old into a bright, curious 6-year-old, who asked endless questions and climbed trees and insisted on helping in the stables every morning before lessons. She learned to read from Talia's collection of old legends. She learned statecraft from her father during long rides through the kingdom. And she learned compassion from the common wolves who'd fought to protect her. Wolves who now visited the castle regularly to share meals and stories and advice. The kingdom prospered. With Demetrios gone and his conspirators either executed or exiled, the council operated smoothly. Trade routes reopened. Border disputes were resolved through negotiation instead of warfare. And slowly, the Moonstone kingdom regained its reputation as a place of justice and wisdom. But the most remarkable transformation was in Alexandros himself. The grief-stricken, isolated alpha who'd nearly lost everything had evolved into a leader who understood that strength came in many forms. That showing vulnerability wasn't weakness. That asking for help wasn't failure. That the most powerful thing a king could do was love his people instead of ruling them through fear. He never remarried. Rumors circulated about him and Talia. Whispers that the nanny had become something more, but those who knew them understood the truth. They were partners. Parents. Warriors who'd fought through hell together and emerged on the other side as something resembling family. Was it romantic? Maybe. Eventually. In small moments when Kalista was asleep and they'd share wine by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. When their hands would brush during weapons practice, and neither would pull away. When Alexandros would catch Talia watching him with an expression that was equal parts assessment and something softer. But they had time, years of it, to figure out what they were to each other. To let whatever existed between them grow at its own pace, in its own way, without pressure or expectation. For now they were enough. This strange little family unit bound together by grief and love, and a white horse named Nephili. On Callista's 7th birthday, the pack threw a celebration that lasted 3 days. There were competitions and feasts and storytellers who shared legends of Queen Ismene's bravery and wisdom. And on the final night, as fireworks exploded over the castle, Callista made a request that surprised everyone. "I want to make a speech," she announced. "To the pack. About Mama and Papa and Talia and everything that happened." Alexandros exchanged glances with Talia. "Are you sure? You're still young. No one expects." "I'm the heir," Kalista interrupted with the absolute certainty of a child who'd been forced to grow up too fast. "Which means the pack needs to hear from me. Not just see me riding horses or playing in meadows. They need to know who I am. What I believe. What kind of queen I'll be someday." So they assembled the pack in the great courtyard, the same place where Demetrios had been executed 2 years prior, and Princess Callista, 7 years old and barely tall enough to see over the speaking podium, addressed her people. "I don't remember everything about the bad times," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I don't remember most of the months after Mama died. But I remember the important parts. I remember feeling lost. Like I'd fallen into a deep hole and couldn't climb out. And I remember thinking that if I just stayed very still and very quiet, maybe the hurting would stop." The crowd was silent. Thousands of wolves, holding their breath, listening to their future queen. "But it didn't stop," Callista continued. "The hurting just got louder and louder inside my head until I couldn't hear anything else. Until I forgot how to smile or laugh or even want to wake up in the morning. And I think I would have stayed in that hole forever if three things hadn't happened. She held up one small finger. First, my papa didn't give up on me. Even when I gave up on myself. Even when everyone said I was too broken to fix. He kept trying. Kept looking for ways to reach me. And when nothing worked, he trusted someone else to help. Which brings me to the second thing. A second finger joined the first. Talia came. And she didn't try to fix me with medicines or healing rituals or any of the things the other nannies tried. She just told me a story. About a white mare and a boy who couldn't speak and a way to honor memories without letting them destroy you. And that story, that simple story, gave me a thread to hold on to. A way to start climbing out of the hole. The crowd murmured appreciation. Talia, standing beside Alexandros at the edge of the courtyard, looked uncomfortable with the attention but proud nonetheless. And the third thing, Callista said, raising a third finger, was Nephili, the white mare who carried me and Papa through the kingdom, who took me to all the places Mama loved, who helped me understand that remembering someone doesn't mean staying stuck in the past. It means carrying them forward into the future. She lowered her hand and looked out at the assembled pack with an intensity that belied her age. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something. Being an heir, being a future queen, isn't about being perfect. It's not about never breaking or never hurting or always knowing what to do. It's about breaking and then finding a way to heal. It's about hurting and then learning to carry that hurt without letting it consume you. It's about making mistakes and then having the courage to fix them. My mama was the best queen this kingdom ever had, Kalista declared. Everyone says so. But she wasn't perfect. She made mistakes. She trusted the wrong people. Her voice wavered slightly. She died because she chose to be brave instead of safe. And I used to think that meant being brave was stupid. That caring too much about people got you killed. But I don't think that anymore, she continued. Because Papa showed me that being brave doesn't mean being reckless. It means doing hard things even when you're scared. It means asking for help when you need it. It means trusting people even after you've been betrayed. And it means loving people even though love makes you vulnerable. Alexandros felt his throat tighten. His daughter, his brilliant, brave, extraordinary daughter, was saying things he wished he'd understood years ago. So when I'm queen someday, Callista said, I promise I'll try to be like Mama. Strong and wise and fierce. But I also promise I'll be like Papa. Which means I'll ask for help when I need it. I'll trust my advisors. I'll listen to common wolves instead of just nobles. And I'll remember that the strongest wolves are the ones who admit they're not strong all the time. She paused, scanning the crowd. And I promise I'll remember the lesson Talia taught me. That healing doesn't happen overnight. That it's okay to take time. That needing help doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart enough to recognize your limits. The courtyard erupted in cheers. Wolves howled their approval. Children waved banners. And Alexandros felt tears streaming down his face. Tears of pride and grief and overwhelming love for this small person who'd survived so much and emerged stronger for it. When the noise finally subsided, Callista raised her hands for silence one more time. There's one more thing, she said. Tomorrow, I'm going to ride Nephili to Mama's tomb. And I'm going to plant wildflowers there. The kind that bloom where they're not supposed to. The kind that refuse to give up even when winter comes. And I want everyone who loved Mama, everyone who misses her, to come with me. 'Cause I think she'd like that. Being remembered not with sadness, but with flowers and noise and people celebrating her life instead of mourning her death. Another roar of approval. This one even louder. And as Alexandros watched his daughter step down from the podium, watched her accept hugs from pack members, watched her smile and laugh and embody everything Ismene had been, he realized something profound. His wife hadn't just left behind a daughter. She'd left behind a legacy. A living example of what leadership should look like. What strength really meant. What it took to build a kingdom that could survive anything. And Talia had been right all those years ago. Ismene's vision hadn't been about predicting the future. It had been about ensuring it. about making sure that even in death, she could continue protecting the people she loved. The ride to Queen Ismene's tomb the next morning was the largest procession the kingdom had ever seen. Thousands of wolves, maybe tens of thousands, followed Princess Callista and Alpha King Alexandros as they rode nephily through the mountain passes to the shrine built in Ismene's honor. It wasn't a traditional royal tomb. Ismene had requested something simpler in her will. A stone circle in a flower meadow, open to the sky, where wind and rain and sun could reach her ashes. Where wildflowers could grow without restriction. Where anyone who wanted to visit could do so without navigating castle politics or requesting permission. The procession arrived just after noon. Kalista dismounted with her father's help, carrying a basket of wildflower seeds she'd collected over the past year. And one by one, wolves came forward to plant them around the tomb. Nobles and commoners alike. Warriors and craftsmen. The old and the young. They worked in silence, each person adding their own small contribution to the living memorial. And when the last seed was planted, when the tomb was surrounded by freshly turned earth that would soon burst with color, Kalista stood in the center of the stone circle and spoke directly to her mother. "Hi, Mama," she said simply. "I know you can't answer, but I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see all these people who loved you, who still love you, who are making sure your meadow will be beautiful forever." She pulled something from her pocket, a small carved wolf made from white stone that she'd commissioned from the best craftsman in the kingdom. "I made this for you. Well, I asked someone to make it, but I designed it. Supposed to be you. Brave and strong and beautiful. And I'm leaving it here so you're never alone." Kalista placed the carving in the center of the tomb, where rain couldn't reach it, where it would stay protected by the stone circle. Then she looked up at the sky and added, "I miss you every day. But I'm okay now. Papa and Talia are taking good care of me. And I'm learning to be the queen you wanted me to be. I'm learning to be brave like the wildflowers. To bloom even when things are hard." Alexandros joined his daughter in the circle, placing his own offering, a leather journal, sealed in protective wax, containing every letter he'd written to Ismene since her death. Letters he could never send. Thoughts he could never share. Love that had nowhere to go except onto paper. "I kept my promise," he told his dead wife. "I protected our daughter. I exposed your murderer. I've been building the kingdom you dreamed of, the one where justice matters more than power, where compassion is valued as much as strength. And his voice broke. "I still love you. I'll always love you. But I'm learning to live again. To find joy in small moments. To imagine a future that honors your memory without being trapped by it." Talia stood at the edge of the circle, respectful of the private moment but close enough to intervene if needed. Alexandros caught her eye and gestured for her to join them. "Come here," he said quietly. "You're family. You belong in this circle." Talia approached slowly, uncertain. She'd never met Queen Ismene in life. Had only known her through contracts and letters and second-hand stories. But as she stepped into the stone circle, as she stood beside Alexandros and Callista, she felt something shift. Presence, maybe. Or just the weight of expectation. The responsibility of carrying forward a dead woman's legacy. "Thank you," Talia whispered to the tomb. "For trusting me with them. For knowing I'd keep them safe even when you couldn't. I promise, I swear, I'll never let you down." And in the silence that followed, with the sun warm on their faces and wildflower seeds waiting to bloom, the three of them stood together. Not a perfect family. Not an undamaged one. But a family nonetheless. Forged through tragedy and bound together by love and commitment, and the shared understanding that healing was possible even after the worst had happened. Years passed. Kalista grew into a teenager, then a young woman. She trained with the kingdom's best warriors. Studied statecraft with the council's wisest members. Learned diplomacy from visiting dignitaries and tactical thinking from her father. And through it all, she rode nephily almost daily, even as the white mare grew older and slower, even as arthritis settled into the horse's joints and made long journeys painful. On Callista's 15th birthday, her coming-of-age ceremony, She made a decision that shocked the entire kingdom. "I'm not naming Nephili as my royal mount," she announced during the traditional ceremony where heirs chose their lifelong battle companion. "I'm retiring her, with full honors. And I'm dedicating the rest of her life to comfort and peace in the royal meadows where she can live out her days surrounded by flowers and sunshine." The council objected. Tradition demanded that the heir's chosen mount serve until death. That was the bond. The sacred connection between wolf and horse that symbolized the connection between ruler and kingdom. But Callista stood firm. "Nephili already served," she said. "She carried me through the darkest time of my life. She helped me heal when healing seemed impossible. And now it's my turn to honor that service by letting her rest. By saying, thank you, instead of demanding more." She paused, looking directly at the council members who'd dared to argue. A good leader doesn't extract everything from those who serve them. A good leader knows when to show gratitude. When to release someone from duty with honor instead of riding them until they collapse. And if that's not traditional, if that makes me a different kind of heir, then good. Because the kingdom needs leaders who understand that strength includes knowing when to be gentle. The council couldn't argue with that. Wouldn't dare, given how much the pack loved their fierce young princess. So Nephili was retired to the royal meadows, the same wildflower field where Kalista had first spoken after 6 months of silence. And the white mare lived there for 3 more years, grazing peacefully, visited daily by the princess she'd helped save. When Nephili finally died at the age of 31, ancient for a horse, Callista held a ceremony that rivaled royal funerals. The entire pack turned out to honor the mare who'd become a symbol of healing and hope, who'd carried their princess through grief into joy, who'd proven that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism were quiet ones, patient ones, acts of simply showing up and being present when someone needed you most. They buried Nephili in the meadow she loved, beneath a marker carved with words Callista had chosen carefully. "Here lies Nephili, the white mare who taught a broken princess how to fly again. May wildflowers grow eternally where her hooves once trod." By the time Callista turned 20, Alexandros was ready to step down, not because he was weak or failing, but because he'd accomplished what he'd set out to do. The kingdom was stable. The pack was prosperous. His daughter was ready. "You're sure?" Talia asked him the night before the coronation ceremony. They were in his private chambers, a space she'd occupied more and more over the years as their relationship had slowly, carefully evolved from co-parents to something deeper. Partners. Lovers. Eventually, though neither had formalized it, mates in all but name. "I'm sure," Alexandros said. "I've been Alpha for 23 years. I've survived assassination attempts, political coups, and my own brother's betrayal. I've raised a daughter who's smarter, braver, and more compassionate than I ever was. And I'm tired, not broken, just ready to rest, to let someone else carry the weight for a while." "She'll be a good queen," Talia said. "She'll be extraordinary," Alexandros corrected. "Because she learned from Ismene's example, yes. But also because she learned from her own pain. From her own journey through darkness. The best leaders are the ones who've been broken and rebuilt themselves." "And you?" Talia asked. "What will you do? Where will you go?" Alexandros smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached his golden eyes and erased years from his face. "I was thinking we could travel. You and me. No royal duties. No political responsibilities. Just 2 wolves exploring the world. Seeing places Ismene always wanted to visit but never got the chance. Living the life she would have wanted for me instead of mourning forever." Talia's eyes glistened. "She would like that. You're traveling without guilt. You're moving forward." "I think she'd love it," Alexandros agreed. "And I think somewhere, somehow, she's been waiting for me to give myself permission to be happy again. To honor her memory by living instead of existing." "Then let's do it," Talia said. "After the coronation. After we see Kalista crowned. Let's go find our own wildflower meadows." And that's exactly what they did. Queen Callista's coronation was held on a clear spring morning, exactly 16 years after her mother's death. The ceremony took place not in the traditional throne room but in the wildflower meadow beside Queen Ismene's tomb. Symbolic choice. A way of saying that the new queen understood where she came from and who she was honoring. The entire pack gathered. Wolves stood shoulder to shoulder, nobles beside commoners, warriors beside craftsmen, old beside young. And in the center of it all, surrounded by blooming wildflowers, Princess Callista knelt to receive the crown. But before Philippos, now ancient but still sharp as ever, could place the Moonstone crown on her head, Kalista held up a hand. "Wait," she said. "There's something I need to do first." She stood and walked to the tomb where her mother's ashes rested. She placed both hands on the white stone wolf carving, now weathered by years but still beautiful, and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "Mama, I'm about to become queen. Your crown, your throne, your pact. And I'm terrified, because I know I'll make mistakes. I know I'll face challenges I'm not ready for. I know there will be days when I want to give up." She paused, gathering strength. "But I also know I can do this, because you taught me that being strong doesn't mean never falling. It means getting back up every time you do. Papa taught me that asking for help is wisdom, not weakness. And Talia taught me that healing takes time and patience, and the willingness to be gentle with yourself. So I'm making you a promise," Callista continued. "I promise I'll lead with compassion and strength. I promise I'll remember that the pack isn't something I own, it's something I serve. I promise I'll never forget that every wolf, from the highest noble to the smallest pup, deserves dignity and justice. And I promise," her voice broke slightly, "I promise I'll make you proud." Silence hung over the meadow. And then, as if in response, a white butterfly landed on the tomb carving. It rested there for a long moment, wings slowly opening and closing, before flying up and circling Callista 3 times. Pack gasped. White butterflies were rare in the Kairos Mountains. Some said they were messengers from the moon goddess. Others said they were the spirits of the dead, returning to bless the living. Callista watched the butterfly soar away, and when she turned back to face the pack, tears streamed down her face. But she was smiling, radiant, ready. "Now," she told Philippos. "I'm ready now." The old wolf placed the Moonstone crown on her head. The ancient circlet, embedded with stones that glowed faintly in sunlight, settled perfectly as if it had been made for her. Which, in a way, it had. Every queen's crown was adjusted to fit. Every ruler's throne was shaped by their predecessors. "Rise, Queen Kalista," Philippos declared. "Heir of the Moonstone throne. Daughter of Queen Ismene and Alpha King Alexandros. Leader of the pack. May the moon goddess guide your path and may your rule bring prosperity to all wolves under your protection." Kalista rose, and the pack erupted in howls, the traditional wolf celebration that echoed through the mountains and valleys, carrying the news to every corner of the kingdom. Their princess had become their queen. And as Alexandros watched his daughter accept the crown he'd worn for over 2 decades, watched her stand tall and confident and absolutely certain of her purpose, he felt the last piece of his grief finally release its hold on his heart. Ismene was gone. Would always be gone. But her legacy lived on in this extraordinary young woman who'd survived the unthinkable and emerged stronger for it. He caught Talia's eye across the meadow. She nodded once, proud, satisfied, mission complete. They'd done what Ismene had asked. Protected Kalista. Helped her heal. Ensured she was ready for this moment. And now, finally, they were free to live their own lives. To write their own story. To find their own happiness without guilt or obligation or the weight of the past. 3 days after the coronation, Alexandros and Talia left the Moonstone Kingdom. They traveled light. Just 2 packs, 2 horses, and a map marked with all the places Ismene had dreamed of visiting. The crystalline lakes of the northern territories. The ancient forests where legend said the first wolves were born. The coastal cliffs where ocean met sky in an endless horizon. They traveled for months, then years, sending letters back to Queen Callista, sharing stories of their adventures, receiving news of the kingdom's continued prosperity. And slowly, without fanfare or formal ceremony, Alexandros and Talia became mates. Not because tradition demanded it. Not because politics required it. But because they'd earned it. Because they'd stood beside each other through hell and emerged as partners who understood each other's scars and strengths. They were happy. Not in the explosive, passionate way Alexandros had been happy with Ismene, but in a quieter, steadier way. The happiness that came from being with someone who knew your worst moments and loved you anyway. Who asked nothing except honesty and presence. Who understood that love didn't always mean grand gestures. Sometimes it meant simply sharing space and silence and the comfortable routine of daily life. But this isn't a story about Alexandros and Talia's happily ever after. This is a story about what happened next. About the choice Queen Callista made 5 years into her reign that would change the kingdom forever. She was 25. Unmarried, despite pressure from the council to choose a mate and produce an heir. And she'd just received disturbing intelligence from her border guards about strange movements in the eastern territories. Wolves gathering in unusual numbers. Whispers of a new challenger who claimed descent from a bloodline that predated even the Moonstone throne. Queen Kalista stood in the throne room reading the reports when her head of security, a grizzled warrior named Leander, cleared his throat. "Your Majesty," he said carefully. "I've been investigating these rumors. And there's something you need to know. Something your father buried years ago. Something that, if true, could destabilize everything." "What kind of something?" Kalista asked, her voice steady despite the dread pooling in her stomach. "There's a claim," Leander said slowly, "that your mother, Queen Ismene, had a sister. A twin sister who was exiled before you were born for refusing to acknowledge pact law. And according to these reports, that sister had children. Descendants who believe they have as much right to the Moonstone throne as you do." The room fell silent. Because if that was true, if Ismene had hidden family, if there were other heirs with legitimate claims, then everything Alexandros had fought for, everything Ismene had died protecting, was suddenly in question. Queen Kalista looked down at the reports in her hands. At the implications spreading out like cracks in ice. At the choice she'd have to make between truth and stability, between family loyalty and kingdom security. And then she did something that would have made both her parents proud. She smiled. Not with fear or uncertainty, but with the fierce determination of someone who'd already survived the unthinkable and knew she could survive this too. "Send for my father," she ordered. "Send for Talia. Recall them from wherever they're traveling. And summon the council for an emergency session." "Your Majesty," Leander asked, confused by her calm. "If my mother had a secret sister," Callista said clearly, "then I want to know everything. Every detail. Every truth. Because we don't build strong kingdoms on lies and buried secrets. We build them on honesty. Even when honesty is difficult." She stood, the Moonstone crown glinting in the afternoon light streaming through the throne room windows. "And if there are wolves out there who believe they have a claim to this throne, if there are relatives I never knew existed, then I want to meet them. Talk to them. Understand what they want." "But your Majesty," Leander protested, "they could be dangerous. They could be planning to challenge you the way Demetrios challenged your father." "Then I'll face that challenge," Kalista interrupted. "The same way my father faced his. With truth and courage and the understanding that running from problems doesn't make them disappear. It just makes them worse." She walked past Leander, past the guards flanking the throne, and headed toward the private chambers where she kept her most precious possessions, including a letter, sealed and addressed to her, that Talia had given her on her 18th birthday with strict instructions not to open it unless she absolutely needed guidance. The letter was from her mother, written in Ismene's own hand, left with Talia years ago as part of the original contract. Callista had never opened it, had been saving it for the moment when she truly needed her mother's wisdom. And now that moment had arrived. She broke the seal and unfolded the yellowed paper. Her mother's handwriting, elegant and familiar, seemed to reach across the years. "My dearest Callista, If you're reading this, it means you've discovered the truth. My sister. Exile. The family I couldn't acknowledge because pact law forbade it. I'm sorry I kept this secret. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. But please understand I was trying to protect you. Trying to give you a chance at a normal life before you had to face the complicated reality of our bloodline. My sister's name is Ariadne. She was exiled when we were 17 because she refused to submit to the arranged marriage our family demanded. She ran to the Eastern Territories and built her own pact, one that operates outside traditional pact law, one that values freedom over hierarchy. I loved her, still love her, but I chose duty over family, chose the crown over my sister, and I've regretted it every day since. If she or her descendants ever come looking for you, if they ever claim their right to challenge, please don't make my mistake. Don't choose duty over family without at least trying to find a third option. Don't assume that power and love can't coexist. You're stronger than I was, braver than I ever could be. And I trust you to find a way forward that honors both your crown and your heart. All my love always, Mama. Queen Kalista read the letter 3 times. Then she carefully folded it, placed it in her private safe, and returned to the throne room with a decision already forming. Leander, she said when she found him still waiting nervously by the throne. Send an invitation to the Eastern Territories. To whoever is leading this alleged challenge. Tell them Queen Callista invites them to the Moonstone Castle for a council meeting. No tricks, no traps. Just honest conversation about family, legacy, and what it means to lead. Your Majesty, that could be dangerous. Kalista finished. Unprecedented. Possibly the stupidest decision a young queen has ever made. She smiled. Maybe. But it's also the right thing to do. And I learned from the best teachers that doing the right thing matters more than doing the safe thing. She climbed the 3 steps to the Moonstone throne and sat down with the casual authority of someone who'd been born for this. Besides, she added, I'm curious. If I have family I never knew about, if my mother's sister exists and has built her own pact,